Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am Greg Sheshpatowski. I'm the Director of Leadership Development and Executive Search Services at MASB. My team is the team responsible for all the in-district workshops you experience, strategic planning, superintendent search, working with you on board self-assessments, and all of the events that you attend, like the annual leadership conference that we have coming up just around the corner. Hopefully, you all are registered for that. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar next week. So if that is something you would like to share with your other board members, just know that that will be on the way. Today, we're talking about working with your superintendent as a board. So our topics today we're going to talk about the current state of the superintendency, effective board and superintendent relationships, communications and public relations, importance of calendaring and the meeting agenda creation, investing in the professional development and mentoring of your superintendent, and the impact of positive board and superintendent relations. As we go through today, if you have any questions, please use that chat. I have Cindy and Larissa helping me out today. They'll be monitoring those questions as we go throughout the day. So when we look at the state of the superintendency and we look at the previous school year, in the 22-23 school year, we had 71 vacancies in the state of Michigan. 5 of those were for ISDs and 66 of those were in local school districts. So as you can see, we did see a significant drop from the previous year. You could see our overall vacancies were down by 36 from the 21-22 school year. So that's a positive trend considering all of the turnover we saw during the years of COVID. So seeing these numbers come back down is a really positive thing. It means folks are staying put and districts are experiencing consistency in that leadership, which is great. So far this year, what we're tracking is we are tracking 34 vacancies right now. All of those have been at local school districts at the local school district level. As we look back at last year, of those 71 vacancies that we had, only 19 of them were filled by folks that had previous superintendent experience. The rest of those postings were filled by principals and frontline administrators from the central office. Again, this is a trend that we've been seeing. A number of folks are filling positions that have not had superintendent experience. So this is something we're seeing because of all of the retirements that we have had recently over the past 4 years or so. We'll continue to see those retirements come through. I know last year at MASA's, the Superintendent Association Winter Conference, they recognized 40 individuals who were retiring from the profession. So we're going to continue to see the turnover in those with those retirements as well. But hopefully we're not seeing the 100 changes in a school year like we were during the years of COVID anytime soon. So what are those searches that we're tracking this year looking like? So 5 of those are at ISDs vacancies, and we have seen 2 folks from the assistant superintendent and director positions take those positions, and 3 of those have been filled so far by sitting superintendents. So when we think about superintendent and school board relations, this is the decisive element in superintendent tenure, is how well folks are getting along with their boss, which is you, the board. You have 1 employee, and the 5 or 7 or 9 of you are the boss of that superintendent. My biggest advice to you is, as we go through today and everything that you hear today, is just remember that be a great boss. Folks do not leave jobs, they leave bad bosses. And we're going to talk about all the ways that you can help your superintendent have a successful experience and continue that leadership tenure at the top of your district. We know that there is a positive correlation between the superintendent tenure and student achievement. There's research that shows that effect starts to show in as little as 2 years into a superintendent's tenure in the position. So there's a lot of benefit to keeping a superintendent in the position over time. A high-functioning school board is a school board who functions well together, and they are also the ones who are working well with their superintendents. Again, that board and superintendent relationship working together in a strong way to maintain that relationship over time to help benefit kids. So When we think about the relationship of a superintendent and a board of education, what are some expectations that a board should have of their superintendent? So, first of all, treat board members fairly and equitably, making sure that the superintendent has time with all of the board members. They're not only spending time with a certain number or just the board president, getting to know all of the board members, being adequately prepared for meetings. You should absolutely expect that your superintendent comes to your board meetings prepared. Generate dependable information and distribute all of that information to all board members, making sure that everybody is on the same page at all times, making sure that they are accessible to board members on a reasonable schedule. Again, keep an emphasis on that reasonable schedule. They should not be at your beck and call. They should not be interrupting their school day over and over and over again, responding to board inquiries and requests. But they should definitely and absolutely be accessible to board members. Give honest and thoughtful and well-reasoned opinions and reactions to issues to make sure that the board is making the most informed decisions possible. Being available to present policy options for consideration by the board. Making sure that they are not manipulating the board and they're not trying to divide the board to win an issue. They should not be talking behind the board members' backs, and making sure that they are being loyal to the board and the goals that they have set forward. When you think about communication considerations, making sure that you all have a plan together and that everybody knows how things will be handled. So making sure that your board policy and procedures are clear, shared, and reviewed on a regular basis. Ensuring that you have a communications plan and a program in place, knowing who's going to respond in which cases, who is going to be the board spokesman, what issues should be directed to the superintendent to respond to. And then when it comes to issues within the district or things that you need to be notified about, what are the board's preferences for communication from the superintendent? Or in which situations is an email appropriate? In which situations would you prefer a text, a phone call, or whatever that communication plan looks like for which situation? Making sure that all of that is communicated to the superintendent and everybody's on the same page. Remember, nobody can pass a test they didn't know they were taking. So make sure that you've been very clear with your superintendent on those communication expectations, how you expect to be informed and when, depending on what the situation is. So policymaking is the primary function of the board. It expresses and articulates the expectations and wishes of the board, creates a framework for action plans, and guides and regulates the behavior of the staff, administrators, and the board. So let's take a look at a few aspects of policy here. So policy helps you to be ready for a crisis. This helps you to assign a spokesperson who can respond during that crisis. And here's some recommendations. So number one, the superintendent could be the person that responds during those situations and handles those inquiries that come in. The board president would also be an excellent choice for that situation, making sure that all communication is coming through a single point. And then depending on the issue, building principals could be the right person, making sure that you have that plan. And keep in mind that no matter who is the designated spokesperson, all board members must be ready to respond to those inquiries, whether it be in the grocery aisle or by a media request. So when we think about calendaring throughout the year and working with your superintendent, there are a lot of benefits for using an annual board calendar. Number one, it helps to keep the board on track. And it helps new board members understand the work of the board. It ensures that items don't get missed, and it balances the length of the agenda as well, knowing what can wait until a further meeting so that we're not having 3, 4, 5-hour meetings each time we get together. And it also helps board members to plan their own personal calendars, knowing what to expect throughout the year, knowing which meetings will take more time, or at what points of the year there will need to just be more meetings. A useful tool that you can go through with your superintendent for the planning of these agendas is a superintendent's calendar. You can find that on the Superintendent's Association website, on MASA's website. They produce that every year, and it's a great guide and tool to help you build your agendas throughout the year, and is also a great conversation starter as you're planning your agendas with your superintendent each year. So another thing to consider is how exactly are you developing your agendas for your meeting? How involved is your superintendent? There's lots of ways that this could look, and it depends on the board's president and the superintendent on which method is used. And you may decide to change this method over time as the superintendent becomes more versed in their position or more comfortable with the board, or as longevity goes along. You may decide a different method is more preferable. So first, you can meet with the superintendent to jointly develop the agenda. You can meet with the superintendent to review an already developed agenda, or the superintendent could develop and share the agenda packet with the board president prior to preparing the board packet, or the superintendent could develop and share the agenda packet with all the board members simultaneously. So it's up to you which works best for your board. As far as the agenda structure, these are also things that you can consider discussing with your superintendent and should be working on together as a board. So the structure, where does the consent agenda fall on your agenda? Are you having timed items? Are there things that are you going to be limiting the number of items on the agenda? How will you delineate between information only and action items? Focus the agenda on district goals and student achievement. How are you wrapping back that agenda and those agenda items to those district goals and focusing on reports out on student achievement? How are you prioritizing items and presentations on that agenda? How often are those presentations occurring? Is this something that you want to schedule on a regular basis, or do they happen at every meeting? Determining the placement of public comment on an agenda. And again, those are all things that you will need to decide in your individual district with your superintendent. As we start to think about how do we invest in our superintendent, how do you take care of your one employee, thinking about professional development is a key consideration. So why would you invest in your superintendent's professional development? Well, number one, we know that it can lead to increased longevity, which ultimately benefits your students in your districts, which is key. We know that the shelf life of a superintendent in the state of Michigan is only 2.7 years at this point. So we want to obviously have a superintendent in your district as long as possible. I'm sure you do as well. So what are some things? We know that the national average is 6 years in larger districts, 2.5 years in districts with low income and students of color. And we know that those numbers are even lower when the leader is of color or a female. So again, why are we investing in the professional development? It's going to build their confidence, credibility, and there is obviously a correlation to student success. And why is it so important? Ultimately, it delivers benefits to the individual, to the profession of the superintendency, and to education, and to the public. It ensures that a leader will continue to be competent through his or her career, and it's correlated to an increased student achievement and performance, which is ultimately why we're all doing this work. So again, why are we investing? We know that with quality, continuous professional development, the superintendent will establish different district level goals with the governance team and align those resources and supports with building level teams. It'll help them to ensure that their capabilities keep pace with current standards and the needs that are facing your districts and students. It'll ensure that they maintain the knowledge and skills needed to support their staff and their students. And it'll ensure that their knowledge stays relevant and up to date so that they can continue to lead, manage, and influence, coach, and mentor others. And lastly, it'll continue to increase public confidence in themselves as a leader and the profession as a whole. So ultimately, making that investment in your superintendent will ultimately result in overall district success. So make sure that as a board that you are committing to supporting your superintendent's professional growth, their membership in their superintendent's association, attending conferences, any of those opportunities that they have to grow as a professional. So when we think about the superintendent, we know that district level leadership has an impact on student achievement. We talked about that earlier, how those impacts start to develop in as little as 2 years. We know that effective superintendents focus their efforts on creating goal-oriented districts. And we know that superintendent tenure has an impact on student achievement. McCrell, the Mid-Continent Research for Education and Learning, did a meta-analysis. They looked at 27 studies since 1970. They used rigorous quantitative methods to do that, and they found some key findings. And these were around non-negotiable goals. So effective superintendents ensure that collaborative goal setting processes result in non-negotiable goals in 2 areas. And those 2 areas should be around student achievement and classroom instruction. So as far as this goes, as a board, we need to make sure that you are supporting these non-negotiable areas, that you are supporting these goals, and that these goals are developed in cooperation with your board. I just froze. Okay. So what were some of these key findings? So in districts with higher levels of student achievement, the local board of education is aligned with and supportive of those non-negotiable goals for achievement and instruction. So making sure that you're developing those goals together, that all the efforts of the board are supporting those non-negotiable goals so that the superintendent can continue to move those forward within the district. Working with your superintendent. So again, here were a lot of the keys that you can work on to improving that relationship with your superintendent or keeping a strong relationship with your superintendent. So work as a board on being high functioning. If you have not engaged with the board self-assessment tool, that is a free tool available on the MASB website. Make sure that your team is considering taking one of those and taking one every year. We know that people in a district are going to follow their leadership. At a minimum, folks mirror what they see their leadership doing. Most times they will amplify the behaviors that they see of their leadership team. We know everyone in your district is required to be evaluated every year. Why would the Board of Education not set that standard and evaluate themselves every year doing a board self-assessment? So highly encourage you to do that. That's also going to help your superintendent to be informed on what's important to the board and what areas the board wants to work on and how the superintendent can also support the board in those efforts. Make sure that you're being specific and realistic about expectations of your superintendent. These folks have incredibly complex jobs, lots of hats. Depending on the size of your district, they may not just be the superintendent. They could also be the transportation director, the food service director, the human resources officer. They wear lots of hats. So making sure that as a board and when you're setting goals and you have those expectations that you're being realistic given the constraints and the expectations and the responsibilities that your superintendent is trying to complete. Honor the chain of command and communication protocols, making sure that folks as board members that you are staying within your role and making sure that communications that come to you directly are being directed back to the superintendent in the appropriate times, and making sure that communication chain is open and making sure that folks are not leapfrogging your superintendent and coming to the board especially with those issues that should be directed to the administration. Followed through on decisions that support the direction of the district. So again, do what you said you were going to do in your planning and your strategic planning and your goal setting. Make sure that you are supporting those decisions of your superintendent when those are in alignment with the goals that you set. And then setting appropriate time and funding for the professional development needs of your superintendent. Again, this is your one employee, making sure that they have all the support and they have the knowledge that they need to help lead your district in this complex job and doing the best work that they can for you. So again, making sure that the funding for those efforts and that the time is set aside, that they can go out, get the professional development they need, and ultimately help impact the academic achievement of your students. So that is what I had for you today. Larissa, I would entertain any questions that are coming in through the chat.
No questions right now. Feel free, anyone, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat.
You also might share a specific thing that you have done in building your relationship with your new superintendent, something that the other folks might benefit from.
Yes, absolutely, Amanda. I see your comment there. Yes, between a board and superintendent, there should be no surprises, especially at the board table, right? And we need to be having those discussions ahead of time, presenting those questions to your superintendent ahead of time, so that they can prepare and come to you at the board meeting with the data that you and a good response for your question that the whole board can hear at the same time. Absolutely. Yes, there are different evaluation tools for superintendents. MASA has the school advanced tool. I know there are also ISDs like Macomb ISD that have a superintendent evaluation tool, and MASB has a superintendent evaluation tool. Those are all approved by MDETUs. Obviously, we like our tool and would recommend the use of our tool. But again, that is a conversation that you can absolutely have with your superintendent on what is going to be an evaluation instrument that works for your board, works for your superintendent, and ultimately gets you to where you want to be every year with that evaluation process. If you have questions on MASB's tool, you can find lots of resources on our website, or feel free to reach out to Jay Bennett. He is our Assistant Director of Executive Search, and he would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the superintendent evaluation. I know we have a lot of new board members on. Hopefully everybody knows that everybody has to be trained on the superintendent evaluation tool. So regardless what tool you're using, you do need to make sure that you are trained prior to evaluating your superintendent. Yes, Richard, if you have issues that come up with your superintendent, whether it's around evaluation or any other issue that your board is having, we are here to support you. So please feel free to reach out to either, if it's an evaluation question, you can reach out to Jay Bennett. If you have other questions about governance or needing a workshop or just issues that are going on, please reach out to any of us on my team, myself or Debbie Stair as well. We'd be happy to help and offer any guidance that we can. And don't forget that we also have Brad Banasic if it's a legal question. You can always reach out to Brad as well. Yeah, Lakia, that's great. Setting up a time to meet with your superintendent is a great idea. Getting to know each other as people and talk about goals and understanding each other's roles, that's great.
Corinne asked, is there anywhere that discusses the difference between the different tools?
I don't know that there is actually a tool out there that discusses the differences between them. I would direct you to Jay Bennett though, because he is our guru on superintendent evaluation. I know he knows the differences between our tool and some of the other ones. And at least from feedback from superintendents who have used more than one tool, their reasons for switching between tools. So please reach out to Jay on that question for sure. We'd be happy to get you an answer on that.
Kathy asked, what method should we use to be trained?
So whatever superintendent evaluation tool you're using, that organization should also be providing training on their tool. So, for example, if you're using our tool, we have many trainings throughout the year. We have we will have online trainings monthly, pretty much throughout the year. You can also, if you have a number of people on your board that need to be trained, you can also bring someone in to train just your board in a workshop or something along those lines. But whoever your tool is through, they should be offering training that you can connect with to make sure that you get trained.
Should board members communicate directly to district department heads or work through the superintendent only?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest that you should be working through your superintendent and not leapfrogging your superintendent in those communications with district administration. Obviously, you want to get to know folks in your district and have relationships there as well. But I would be very cautious about leapfrogging your superintendent and going directly to different administrators or building level administrators.
What is the most common disconnect for a new superintendent and the board?
Yeah, I think those communication expectations are usually the biggest disconnect, especially when you have a district that is in a situation where they had a longer term superintendent and a new superintendent is coming in. We see a lot of confusion there because things just happened because that longtime superintendent just made things show up at the board table, or they just knew what to do in certain situations, or they communicated in a particular way that the board got very used to. And none of that was written down. None of that was in a procedure. None of that was an expressed expectation. But then you see with this new superintendent that there is a gap in communication, and folks are not getting the same amount of information or whatever it might be. So I would say having a conversation and making sure that those unwritten expectations are also expressed, and that superintendents are aware of how you like to be communicated with, what information you like to have, what practices that former superintendent did that you really appreciated. And just communicating those, because again, they can't pass a test they didn't know they were taking. So I would say that was probably the biggest hangup that we see with new superintendents.
Kurt asked if you could elaborate on what PD options there are for superintendents.
Sure. So MASA is the Superintendents Association. They have 2 conferences throughout their year that your superintendents could attend. Those are great opportunities for learning and networking with other professionals. If you have a newer superintendent, there is also the Horizons Academy that MASA has. It's a really comprehensive program. It's really, really well done in helping your new superintendent learn about all the different aspects of the job, and helping them get their feet under them. And then they are also provided a mentor through that program. So not only do they get the knowledge that they can come back and apply in your district, but they also have a trusted, experienced superintendent that they can lean on for advice as that mentor. The Michigan Leadership Institute also offers programming for superintendents as well. That would be another resource you could look at. And then AASA, the National Superintendents Association, would be an additional resource that you could look at for professional development for your superintendent.
I think this is the last question we have right now. We currently have an interim superintendent. Should we treat that any differently?
Yeah. I mean, your interim superintendent, for all intents and purposes, is your superintendent. So no, I would say in many ways, I would not treat that any differently as far as being the head leader of your district, needing to support them, making sure that they have the information, that they are aware of the communication expectations for the board, making sure that for whatever length of time that interim was with you, that you all have agreed upon goals for that time. Those are all great things to be discussing with your interim. So again, and I mean, it's a complex job. An interim is coming in for a fixed amount of time. They're having reasonable expectations for what can be accomplished during that time. But definitely having established goals and those communication expectations in place would be huge for that relationship.
We got another one. My district has several building principals who are pursuing advanced degrees so they can become superintendents. Are there activities or suggestions of how we can prepare these up and coming senior leaders?
Yeah, and I think that's a tremendous question, and that's something that we are really encouraging districts to do is identify those future leaders to strengthen your administrative bench within your district. So that's great that you are finding folks and identifying folks that are ready to take that next step and take on more senior roles. So MASA also has an aspiring superintendents program. That is, again, another tremendous resource available to you and to your folks to get engaged with, to help them get ready for that superintendency and that next step. So I would encourage them to do that. If you have other folks that are looking to get to, say, the building level administration, MASSP, the Principals Association, also has an academy to help those educators that are looking for that step to get ready. So as you think down the line of the depth of your administrative bench and you're looking at those succession plans and getting folks ready, there are definitely absolutely resources for you out there between those two associations. And then, of course, they could always take a traditional college path. There are also higher education paths that they can take, whether it be through attaining another degree or certification, like an ed specialist or something like that to help them get prepared for central office work as well. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you for your service. Thank you for choosing to serve on a board of education. I hope that this first year of your tenure is going well. Please know that we are available as a resource for you, whatever you're facing. If you need to talk about any of these issues or anything else that's facing your board, please be sure to reach out. And again, this recording will be available for you next week.
Well, we got one more question.
Okay.
If the president and superintendent appear to be resisting setting SMART goals, how can you move past the obstacle?
Yeah. That's a challenging one, Richard. I think that would be worthy of a phone call. With those SMART goals, the superintendent evaluation is set up in that way. Those SMART goals should be set so that you have measurable objectives to evaluate your superintendent on. So if you're not having those SMART goals, I could see how that could be a tremendous challenge. And that would ultimately create a problem at evaluation time, I would think. And it's also going to make it challenging for you all to evaluate what activities are happening within the district and the success of those activities if those goals are not written in a SMART fashion. So yeah, Richard, please reach out so we can have a conversation more specifically. Reach out either to myself or Debbie Stair or Jay Bennett, and we'd be happy to talk with you about that.